but now I think if you're a contractor for Google, you can't even say you work at Google. It's like you work for this other company. It sounds really strange.
Yeah, if somebody like asks you, like you're like, it's they give you these official lines, like if somebody asks you, you're working, through blah whatever agency I was working through for Google.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, I'm never gonna talk to anybody, so it's really not gonna come up. It's
Here
really
in
not
the
gonna be a problem.
newsroom.
I'm here for the snacks and the paycheck.
I used to have a production design job in publishing,
Mhm.
and the snacks were so poor that basically I would say like once every 2 months, the guy who ran the mailroom clearly had received some sort of authorization to bring out this giant tub of peanut butter filled pretzels that was from the drugstore. And people would lose their minds. Just so excited. Come out with napkins to like take, 5 or 6 back to their desks. It was just, I mean, I feel sad just thinking about it. Although I also now feel very nostalgic because, that office is on ice, more or less. Like, I still know lots of people who work there, but like everyone is working from home.
Right.
It's just totally still on lockdown. So I feel a mix of, I guess, is that pathos if it's like pain and sorrow?
I think pathos is like the thing that most people in publishing feel.
Just 24/7.
Just 24/7. They're like, oh, remember when people read books?
Oh my God. Yeah, it's really, I don't know. I mean, there were things I enjoyed about that job because if you want a job, the job I had just basically, they moved me to this like god awful part of the office where there were no windows. Um, it was just like such a long story. I was basically with the accounting people, which is fine because then I could bug them about paying my invoices. Like, hey, like, what's up? I haven't been paid in 2 months. Like, what's up? But also, no one was supervising me directly. And so, as long as I was kind of chill, if someone came over and saw that I was blatantly working on comics at my desk, um, my demeanor could kind of get me through that situation. Um, so it was kind of okay, but I did end up leaving just because it was so. I ended up getting another job as a contractor at a web company doing illustration, and like that's what I'm still doing, and I really like it. Um, but yeah, I have a mix. It was in some ways the perfect job, in some ways it was just like I cannot have another conversation about a comma ever again. It's over.
So were you literally doing the changes that they would mark up for you, like copy changes and stuff?
Yeah, book design gets really romanticized, but whatever anyone thinks about book design, I was not doing cover design, which is definitely the glamorous end, but even
Right.
that, so the designers would come up with beautiful covers, but because the marketing people weren't in-house, sometimes the people at the larger publishing company didn't see the covers until they were already at quite advanced stages. And so they would just kill stuff
Oh,
left, right, and
jeez.
center. And so people would have really worked very hard to make these gorgeous and very, eye-popping covers and then just have them mown down
Jeez.
by marketing machine gun fire. It sounded really unfortunate, shall we say.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I've had to like kind of cross paths with marketing, like it hasn't been a very pretty sight. And it's one of those things where it's like they're pretty disparate things when you really think about it.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, but they have you when you're in design, you have to like deal with these marketing cats all the time, and you're not speaking the same language. They're basically salespeople, and they're frequently like trying to sell you. Like salespeople are always trying to sell. They're trying to sell
Yeah.
you on their idea. They're trying to sell you on how cool they are. They're trying to sell you on their brand of cigarettes. Like and like that. That doesn't meld well with creatives.
And if you ever want to see something truly awkward, watch a cartoonist trying to sell their work. And then you'll realize that marketing people, I mean, like, for better or for worse, like, they really do have the personality for it. Whereas when a humble cartoonist who spends all their time alone in a cave tries to emerge, into the sunlight and sell their wares.
We come out of our hole twice a year for shows, and we're like, how do we talk to people again?
Ugh. And I mean, I don't know when you'll be broadcasting this, but I mean, this is SPX weekend. This is when we met.
Yeah, yeah. I want to say, was it 2002 or 2003?
Either one is very possible. It's definitely,
Or both?
I want to say 2002 because that was my first SPX.
Okay.
And at that point, it was small enough that you could meet literally everyone.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was no playing it cool and not not meeting people.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody even attempting to play it cool, especially like once, the tables were covered over, like all the
Oh
cool
yeah,
out the window.
yeah, definitely. Which I mean, nowadays, and again, I say this with a mix of pain and sorrow because, obviously it's not happening. Nowadays it's so big. I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
I know the people I know from the olden times,
Yeah.
and I know the people I come with, who are usually Summer Pierre, Glynis Fox, and Jen Hayden. And that's really, and I'm also, I think I've actually become more shy. Um, Maybe it's because I don't drink anymore. I don't know. But the idea of talking to strangers is so painful.
Yeah.
And you think that would go away as you get older, but now I just feel like it's a combination of shyness and I genuinely cannot be bothered to meet new people. I'm completely serious. I'm like, I know the people I know. I like them. I like, it's also like, I don't want to have to prove myself to new people. Like that awkward conversation where you're like, "Oh, what have you done?" And you say something and they haven't heard of it, and you're just like, "Oh, fuck! Like maybe I should have just not spoken to you. Like that's fine." So
Well,
it's
there's kind of a generational thing for me now too, because I'm just like it's hard. I did CALA this year, which was a great show, and I'd done. I think you're right. Yeah, you were at this last short run, right? Last year.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it was so great.
that's the best show. But yeah, I did
Oh,
CALA a couple of months later, and I was like hot off of short run because I always do well at short run because I've done it for 5 years straight.
yeah.
And Pacific Northwest audiences are just great in general. And then when I did this LA show, like nobody knows me. The LA show has a much more just the flavor of it's pretty different. LA's a lot more kind of I don't want to be dismissive and say trendy, but the look and feel of it is much more animation based. I think a
Oh,
lot
okay.
of people who are there are in that industry. And they're also like a lot younger and a lot hipper. And so like you look at me with my like gray goatee and like hat covering my balding head and my chubby cheeks, and you're just like, oh, hey, so you make dad comics, right? I'll come back to you in like 30
Oh
years.
no. And you just slap them in the face with a copy of your minis, and you're just,
I do.
oh.
I say, don't talk to me like that, you young whippersnapper. And I pop into Werther's and chew it just agitated.
Oh yeah. Well, you need to keep your blood sugar up.
I do,
The
starts flagging
word.
after a while.
Yeah. I mean, short run was really. I feel really. I mean, and everything now that happened in the fall is colored by what's happening now.
Yeah.
So it seems especially paradisical in retrospect because I was with people I liked. I was hanging out a lot with Glynis Fox and her dad, who lives in Portland, Tom Fox, who's a old art. He's like a retired art professor. So he's like a really serious older painter. With like a really fun, like he's just like such a fun, like one that combination of like gruff and like funny, which I really like.
Yeah, I've
Um,
been trying for that and missing for years, but
well,
eventually I'll zero in on it.
just keep going. And it was such a beautiful time of year in Seattle.
Hmm.
Like really beautiful fall color. I'd never been there before at all. I thought it was such a beautiful city. Um, I was a little disappointed, and any Seattle person will laugh at me. I was a little disappointed because it's so hilly. My husband and I really like cycling when we're on vacation,
Yeah.
and it's impossible there. I don't know how people do it.
it's pretty hilly. I mean, I live in Oakland, so I'm kind of used
Yeah,
to the hills. Like you can't really go anywhere for more than 2 miles without like having to climb. But yeah, the hills in Seattle are kind of more like San Francisco hills than Oakland hills.
yeah,
They're just straight up and down. Like I was
yeah.
breaking a sweat left and right in the rain, like
Oh yeah.
walking up the hills.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Washington Heights in Manhattan, and the Heights part is real. Like that is a real thing. But they tend to be more long, gradual uphills.
Yeah.
And also when you're in a new city and it's unfamiliar, I don't know. I was just a little sad because there were bikes everywhere.
Hmm.
The city seemed to be infested with like Lime bikes and whatever the like lift equivalent of that is. They were red. I don't know.
I can't remember. I remember all the line bikes.
Yeah, and like it's just kind of sad because yeah, I mean there are lots of cities we've visited, like Chicago, for example, where cycling is actually pretty easy. And I just had no one filled me in on the hills. I'm sure this sounds completely ludicrous, but I'm like a pretty solid East Coast person. Unfortunately, I haven't had much opportunity to travel on the West Coast aside from like LA, San Francisco, that sort of general area.
Yeah.
Portland, which is also very flat. And so yeah, but it was so gorgeous. And we went to the Kubota Gardens. There's like a giant Japanese garden sort of by the airport, and it was so gorgeous. So yeah, in retrospect, all that seems very like fairy tale.
Well, I mean, I always enjoy one of the reasons I continue to do West Coast shows and certainly short run is because I really love Seattle despite what's happened to it, over the last 10 years. Like there's still a flavor of it that I enjoy that
Okay.
feels like it did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's shrinking and shrinking, but it's
How
still
would
it's
you,
still
what would you just see? Like for me, I only know the weird New Seattle where like you pass by someone's house and there's a placard in the front yard of like this 7-story office building they're going to build there.
there.
And I'm just like, that's a person's house? Like in New York, it's very different. Like New York has been flattened and rebuilt like a million times.
Yeah.
But in Seattle, it does seem very recent. Like, so what is it that's are you talking about the sort of like 90s like music scene or like what are you missing?
Yeah, kind of that kind of like flannel and depression, and
Yeah.
bad skin. Seattle, yeah, all you have to do is go out to Ballard and it's still there.
Okay.
And I'm sure people from Seattle are going to listen to this and just really hate on me for saying that. But yeah,
Seattle, we
it
love
feels
you.
like the 90s out there. Like it feels like I remember going to going to a Starbucks and then a record store out there and just being like, did I just walk into like a wormhole into 1994?
Oh my
It was
God.
bizarre.
Wow, that sounds pretty delightful.
It was pretty cool.
We went to a place, and again, people will probably laugh. We went to this place that I think was called Pie Bar, and it was just a bar that sold pie, but like the music was incredible, and I was just like, and all the people who worked there seemed like the people I remember working in coffee shops in like the little college town where I spent my 90s.
Hmm.
And I was just like, maybe this is it. Like, this is really cool. And the pie was really good. And it's really hard to hate on anywhere that has really good pie. The food in general was incredible.
Agreed. Yes.
This is just turning into a Seattle travelogue. But again, it was like the last big trip we took
Well, it
before.
was the before times.
Yeah. And ever since, it's like, I have a friend who lives in Portland. She's a fabulous cartoonist, Lisa Rosalie Eisenberg. And she's working on a memoir about Sylvia Plath and kind of like her teen years in New Jersey for Street Noise, which is like a small publisher in Brooklyn. And she wanted to go to my college, Smith College, to do research about Sylvia Plath, who went to Smith. And I told her I could not go because I had to work. And this decision has haunted me ever since. I'm just like, what was I thinking? Like, what was I thinking? Like, oh, I had to work. Like, I had to work on a book proposal. It didn't go anywhere. And I could have just been hanging out with Lisa and trying Sylvia Plath's typewriter. So it's like I retroactively have crazy FOMO for things that I know I missed out on. I mean, part of it, I guess, is just because New York was so bad during COVID. It was really like tough being here. And I'm sure on the West Coast it was also hard in the big cities. Like,
From
um,
what I've seen, it was leagues worse in New York.
it just got really bad really fast,
Yeah.
and no one knew what to do. And everybody was just trying not to die.
Yeah.
Because no one knew really how infectious it was or like what the infection rate was for the general population. And lots of people, it just got bad really fast. And so it was pretty scary. And yeah, it just has been hard, I think, to emerge from that mentally, especially because we still can't really go anywhere. I mean, we can, and I'm sure people do, but I don't own a car. I don't own a car, and Amtrak has canceled travel to a lot of places I normally would want to go to. Like there's just not running whole lines in the Northeast.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's a little weird. I thought by now that they would have relented a little bit. They're basically just running service on the main tracks kind of between DC, New York, and Boston. In terms of like where I could reasonably go. I'm sure I could still get on the city of New Orleans and just kind of go through go through some kind of like, yeah, intense. I mean, that sounds like a COVID party. Taking like a 36-hour train ride right now, it just sounds like a really bad idea. But yeah, so it's
I
like
wouldn't do it.
you would do it?
No, I would not do
You
it.
would not do it, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I have done it, and I'm not sure it was a good idea even before times.
I've ridden BART here, I think, twice in the last 6 months. And I mean, I hate BART anyway. BART's always gross. But like
Yeah.
when I was on the two times, as I rode it, they opened the Richmond Bridge up in the North Bay, so you can actually ride all the way from Oakland across the bay into Marin County, and then across the
Oh,
Golden Gate Bridge and into
oh,
San
cool.
Francisco. So I've done that a couple of times, and like when I got on BART, I was like trying to figure out how to put my ticket in just using my elbows and just like not
Yeah.
touch anything. It was horrifying. But it sounds like it sounds to me like there was just a real palpable sense of it in the air in New York. Like it felt like it was everywhere because it's so much more dense out there too.
There are a bunch of factors. Like, I think the density has been taken off the table in terms of what was actually causing it. But for me, the issue was sort of like suddenly losing density in certain places. So, for example, the subway got really creepy, especially as a smaller person and as a female presenting person. Being on the subway with very few people, in my experience, has not been a good scene.
Right.
I remember once I was riding to get to Amtrak to go to DC for a friend's book launch, and I was on the subway at 4 o'clock in the morning alone with this guy who was under a towel, who still managed to like rouse himself to start screaming, "Hey, ladies!" at me. Cool? Like, dude, you could have just kept sleeping.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been an acceptable outcome, I think, for everybody. Like, it would have been fine. So, like, the last subway trip I took before COVID got really crazy, I had just gone to see a friend who was going through a kind of a tough time, and it was me and my bike. It was like too long a trip for me to bike the whole way. And this guy, this is so gross, so I apologize to you and your listeners, came across the car to stand next to me. He opened the subway door and just started spitting out the craziest looking stuff. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I thought I was getting COVID, like, right then. I was just like, cool, cool. This is before people started wearing masks.
And this
Um,
was he brought that to you. He easily could have gone to any other part of the train to do
oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah. He was like, I want to freak this person out for some reason. And I was just like, ugh, fine. Like, I'm just like, gonna take some time out from the subway. Luckily, where we live in Upper Manhattan, there are bike paths on either side of the island. One of which goes all the way down to the financial district, something like 220 blocks.
Oh wow.
It's like fully protected, albeit very crowded, but fully protected bike path. And then on the other side, there's a bike path that goes along the Harlem River from where we are in the 190s to the 150s. and then you can cut across pretty easily and go the other bike path if you so choose. So we've just been like biking a lot. I bought a new bike in February, which I thought at the time was just like a fun purchase. But it was specifically like I had a road bike, but it was too big to routinely take on the subway, and so I wanted to get a smaller folding bike. And the smaller bike, which it's like a little BMX bike almost. So it's like more my size. Like road bikes always feel kind of big to me.
Hmm.
It's funny. I look like a child on it. Like it's really hilarious. But I have no biking pride whatsoever. And it has 8 gears, which is great for the hills around here.
Yeah.
So I've been really happy just biking around. I have started taking the subway again recently because the infection rate in New York City is now something like below 1%.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's really great. My husband and I, we just went to the Rockaways to do like a little cycling holiday. Highly recommend to anyone. Um, it's just like New York City, people think of as just like concrete, skyscrapers, whatever. And a lot of it is that. Like the city has just kind of like the geographical landmass of the city has just been taken over by concrete. But at the fringes, there's lots of cool habitat for birds, for seagoing mammals. Whales are kind of back in New York City. We kept on seeing signs in the Rockaways telling us to look out for seals. Um, this may be pretty minor, pretty small fry for a lot of people, but for us, since we again literally can't go anywhere, it's been really fun to just kind of like do a deep dive into the city and see all the stuff that's kind of actually available as opposed to pining after the stuff that's not available.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh, because otherwise, I mean, yeah, it's easy to get into a mentality. And I mean, like our lives are pretty easy. Like I know you have a small child, and I know that's really a big challenge right now.
You
Uh,
know, luckily he is so much more adjustable than his mother and I are. Like she like the other day that she was like, Langston, I'm really sorry. He's in kindergarten now, and he's having to do kindergarten on a laptop, which makes no sense.
oh,
And she was like, I'm really sorry, that you have to do this, but life's going to get better soon. And he's like, Mom, it is what it is. It's fine. It's just like, where did you come from? Like, what is this zen that you have?
yeah,
And can you impart some of it to me? Because I'm stressing out.
yeah, totally. Oh, wow. I'm so glad to hear that because like some of my friends with kids, it sounds like it's been really maybe it's older kids who are used to going to school in person. I guess for like a smaller kid. But I mean, yeah, it must, yeah.
I
And
mean,
I,
it's hard because like he's fortunate too because his mother just bought a duplex in Oakland, and downstairs there's her and him, and then upstairs there's her best friend's wife, and their two kids who are Langston's age. So, and they have a yard.
oh,
So they have this little compound, and like my bubble is my house and their house. So like I
yeah,
kind of see them all the time. And then I see my grizzled mug in a mirror, and like that's kind of it.
yeah,
I have my art studio, so I see people from a distance there. So that
yeah,
that has helped since that's reopened. But
yeah,
he's pretty happy having like his yard and his mother, and like he gets to see me and like his two other mothers kind of or aunts. I don't know how he relates to them, and like his best buddies all in the same house. So he's really fortunate. People who don't have that kind of a built-in system, and I feel terrible. It's one of those things where as you get older and you become a parent, et cetera, you kind of see you're a little more sensitive to how I guess how good you might have it and how you get more sensitive to how I think I feel like I have a lot more empathy for people who don't have. And so I imagine what my life would have been like, at 6 when we lived in Third Ward in Houston, which is a horrible place. If there was a pandemic on top of it and we couldn't go to school and we couldn't go to a park or whatever,
yeah,
that would have been immeasurably worse, and there's people here in Oakland who have that same situation where it's like they don't have a yard, they live in a dangerous neighborhood, they live in places that are compromised, like they're just not healthy. uh,
yeah.
and yeah, I imagine it's unbelievably hard for those kids.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you're making it work. That does sound like a really nice situation.
I'm pretty jealous, honestly.
My studio actually folded because of COVID, and
Oh, geez.
one of my neighbors was like, "Oh, well, why don't you take over the lease?" And I was like, "I don't like that would require a family fortune. Like I don't have that kind of money." Like, yeah, my studio just kind of people just decided it wasn't safe anymore. They decided to work from home.
Yeah.
I think I'm most mad because they made us move in August, which in New York City is like, geez Louise, like give me a fucking break. Like,
That's like a Cambodian death march.
yeah, it's like 90-degree humidity at least with, occasional incredible downpours. I feel really grateful because a friend of mine, sort of out of nowhere, maybe she could feel my desperation, offered to share a rental van with me. And so I was able to do most of my move in a day,
Okay.
which was great. And now I'm just working from home, which is it's a little, I think it's going to be like a bit of like a learning process because I've had a studio now pretty much the whole time. So my husband and I were living in the UK and I had a studio for like the last bit of that. And then when we moved back to the US, I basically moved straight into a studio in Brooklyn, with a bunch of cartoonists. I was in a room with some people I will not mention because but people who were like the main people were like Jason Little, George O'Connor, Kerry Randolph, Riley Brown, Ada Price, and then down the hall was like Simon Fraser, Robin Ha, Dean Haspiel, like a lot of really cool people.
Yeah.
But then we all got evicted from that for reasons which I'm still kind of like, I don't know what the hell happened. Like basically this giant property company bought the lease to these three buildings that were like they had originally been built as one building. And then they got cut up, but the lease was still in the original layout somehow. And so they kicked hundreds of artists out. It was really so dramatic. And then I moved into an office building in Chelsea in Manhattan, which was only affordable because I was sharing with two cartoonists. I was sharing with Greg Benton and Stephen DeStefano.
Okay.
You just won an Emmy. Congratulations, Stephen. And we were sharing this like tiny room in this big office, but then COVID happened and that failed. And so I'm just kind of like maybe it's okay to just work from home for a little while.
Yeah.
I can watch Perry Mason on my television. I can watch Good Wife, which is basically Perry Mason with Juliana Margulies. So yeah, maybe it's okay.
For me, the advantage of having a workspace, and I'm fortunate because you can still miraculously find somewhat affordable workspaces in Oakland. I don't know how San Francisco is.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like the one of the advantages to having a workspace is that I'm in a place where I can't just do the things that my brain always wants me to do, which is just like, stare at a blank screen while listening to a podcast and doing nothing. It's like if
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like if I have like my little closet to work in, like I'm gonna go in there and because people can see me working, I'm gonna perform work. Like
Yeah,
I'm gonna be
that is
like,
so
I'm busy.
nice
Look at me.
though. That is huge.
Yeah. And I
In
mean,
my
having that
opinion,
space in your brain too, where you're just like, I'm going here to do this thing. Like you follow through and you do that thing that you're there for. Like I tend to not really waste time at all when I'm down there.
yeah. The difference for me, and this is something I'm going to have to try and figure out, is that I used to get really good writing done at the studio for
Hmm.
my comics. I mean, comics, for me, like writing a comic requires a higher level of focus than I can normally achieve in my home. That may sound really obvious, but that's what I'm trying to figure out right now because you still can't go to coffee shops in New York City. The libraries are not open. Like the places I used to go when I needed some focus, are not available. I do have a comic. So I've been working on this series of comics about women in baseball in the United States and how like social change and social justice movements have kind of related to the presence of women in baseball.
And that's
And
the Cranklet's Chronicles.
yes, and I do have an issue of that written, so maybe I should just draw it and worry about the writing future things later. Because I had this idea where I was like, okay, I wrote about two women who were involved in running baseball teams. Joan Payson, who provided the cash to found the New York Mets when the Giants went to San Francisco, never forget, and the the Dodgers went to LA. The Giants leaving New York gets overshadowed by the Dodgers leaving, but the Giants played in my neighborhood. So every time I go by the enormous housing project, which is currently, where they played, like that's what's currently there. Like it reminds me of it, and there's still like a walkway part of the way, and you can still visit where home plate was, which is really interesting. So like the geography of it is still there. But yeah, so for me, the Giants leaving retroactively is like a big deal. And the Mets would never have been founded without the Giants leaving because Joan Payson was a huge lifelong Giants fan. And then I wrote one about Effa Manley, who was a big powerhouse in the world of black baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And she ran a team called the Newark Eagles, who won the World Series in the world of black baseball, basically right before integration happened, and Jackie Robinson famously crossed the color line for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and then basically like Major League Baseball grabbed the talent that they liked from the world of black baseball, but everything else failed financially because like all the stars were playing in what had previously been the world of white baseball.
Okay.
And so the next issue I was going to work on was about women playing baseball because I talked about two women owners. I have a draft. The issue, and maybe you can advise me on this, because of COVID, I'm like, I don't know when there are going to be conventions again. So I was thinking of basically redoing the whole thing to post on social media, but maybe that's too short-sighted. Maybe I should just go ahead with the mini comic. That sounds, yeah, I was thinking of that. Maybe just doing short stories within this issue and putting those online.
Oh, so when we were talking about SPX at the turn of the century, just to make it sound a little older,
I don't think we can make ourselves sound much older, to be honest.
I've just leaned into it. Like I'm just like I'm not gonna deny like being old. I'm just gonna be like, hey, I'm old as shit, dude.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
embrace
yeah,
it.
totally.
Well, so when you were doing those shows, what kind of work were you? What kind of work were you doing? Like, what were the subjects of your comics?
At that time, okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So basically, around that time, I had just gotten out of college. I did not attend an art school. I did not really know that much about how to do comics, but I was lucky enough to go to school in a town, Northampton, Massachusetts, which at the time was like comics paradise.
Yeah.
Um, Kevin Eastman had taken all of his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles money, and he founded this museum in Northampton of comic art. And so basically, I volunteered there. I saw all these like incredible originals, everything from kind of like EC Comics to Jaime Hernandez. Kevin Eastman was buying it all because I feel like at that time, people really, in mass culture, people thought comics were weird.
Yes. Yeah, they did.
This is
I always felt
before,
like apologizing to people when I'd introduce myself to somebody and be like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, I do comics." It's like saying like you're a ventriloquist or a juggler. You know, like it felt.
yeah, it was a little clown school adjacent. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like in mass culture, people at least understand that comics exist. It's
I
not
think
all
people
for
think it's
kids.
cool now. Like that's
Yeah.
what I've seen. Like I haven't felt that shame around it for a long time.
Yeah, I think people might still struggle to name a lot of comics, but I think that they know that comics are a real part of American culture.
Right.
And I mean, for good and bad reasons. I mean, some people might have seen like the R. Crumb documentary or that movie about Harvey Pekar with James Urbaniak, or like they might just see superhero movies making crap tons of money, like I don't know, or maybe they read Fun Home or they saw the Fun Home musical. There's been a lot of stuff that's kind of accrued, like accreted around comics that has given it legitimacy in American culture, but at that time, and like I'm talking about like the late 90s, it was still very fringe.
Right.
Or that's how I felt. Basically, so I had this great exposure to sort of like comics culture, but I didn't know a lot about making comics. So I think around the time that I met you, I would have been making what became my first graphic novel, Undertow, which was kind of like a fictional story about a young girl in like the area around Coney Island in New York City in the late 50s, early 60s. And also I was making a lot of, in retrospect, extremely embarrassing autobiographical comics. It's a journey. It's a journey. And now when I do autobiographical comics, it's like, okay, I've been doing them for 20 years. Like I have a slightly better sense of how they work. And I still do occasionally do autobiographical comics. I was just in an anthology that Dean Haspiel and Whitney Matheson put together called Pandemics with an X, like comics. And I did a story about how like the whole time I was a kid, my mom was in these mysterious meetings, which are basically meetings for people who are adult children of alcoholics. But during the pandemic, like all the stuff my mom told me, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with, the whole time I was a kid that came from the meetings became very useful.
Yeah.
Because it's about focusing on what you can control, what you can do today, all that stuff. Like don't compare your insides with other people's outsides.
Right.
All that stuff is super useful. I to the point where I was like, I don't know how my friends who don't have this history are like processing all this. I interviewed my mom for the story, and like talking about the alcohol abuse in our family is still very taboo, and so it was like the most anxiety producing comic I've ever done, bar
Yeah.
none. I felt like my whole world was caving in, and I mean, like so much, yeah. There's just so much of my childhood that I think was like governed by having an alcoholic person in the house, and you kind of like try and shove it away, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to shove it away. However, the flip side is that you have extra resilience for
If
sit-
you're lucky.
yeah, it's so freaking weird, but like that extra resilience when you're faced with something where people are just completely losing their minds. I don't judge anyone who did panic over COVID because it is a very challenging landscape.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It is. And it's unprecedented. Our leadership has been terrible, but just having my mom's voice in the back of my mind, like I mean, my mom will say the Serenity Prayer at the drop of a hat. It is always there. Like she loves it so much, it's part of her email address. Like it is really intense. But now I appreciate it like so much more. And also, like I feel a lot better now that I've stopped drinking as well. So overall, I think it's like doing the comic and talking to my mom about it. It was like the first time we'd had long conversations about the alcoholism in our family. Like it brought me a lot closer to my mom, I think.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, yeah, I mean, like I always joke about, like comics always seem kind of unserious, but the thing is, like modern comics, people are creating comics that speak about their experiences in such a direct way, and they're not always commercial. Like for example, I used to do comics for a part of Medium called Spiralbound that was just autobiographical comics. And it's comics about stuff that people don't talk about in mass culture. Like people, there aren't a lot of like fun TV shows or movies about like caring for an older relative
Right.
or like dealing with the legacy of a childhood with an alcoholic. Like it's not, and there's something very immediate about hearing about it from the person who it happened to, which I think is really awesome. And I think that's something that comics offers that like a lot of other media don't.
Right.
And I think also an advantage with comics is that you can read them so quickly. Like you could read a 300-page memoir about, like prose memoir about an alcoholic family. But like, I really feel like in today's day and age, like the fact that comics are visual and the fact that you can read a comic online, like, on the New Yorker or on Medium or on a million different sites, or on Instagram, and just kind of like absorb that. Like for example, I have a friend, Sasha Mardu, who's been doing comics about the particular kind of therapy she does and how it's helped her unravel a lot of family trauma. And the response she's getting is crazy. And it's stuff that I have never heard of before. I have never seen it on a TV show, on a movie, like anywhere. And it's really touching people, because people have a lot of stuff that happened in their lives that they're not talking about. And our culture doesn't really, I feel like our culture doesn't treat any of that as important. Like we're just really told to just soldier on mindlessly.
Stuff it down, move on. Oh, you were talking earlier about like people kind of digging down to these very specific subjects in their comics. One that I've come across recently through a friend of mine is there's a number of people on Instagram who do comics about ADHD, which
Oh, okay.
which I have, and it's amazing to like see your symptoms just so clearly spelled out, like so clearly, you know, presented. And it's like, here's how life is hard for you because you have this thing. Like here's, how the world is and how your brain is. And
Yeah.
it's that's a tremendous gift to people who perhaps are only recently coming to realize, how their mind works. I know
Oh,
my friend
totally.
Brandon loves them. Like he'll send them to me every day.
Oh. Yeah, it's a different world. I mean, part of it is just like our culture. I remember watching a movie about Alan Moore, and he was talking about culture turning into steam, and how like we all have like these little tiny things that we think of as culture, but like we don't share it. Like back in the 60s or whatever, everybody watched the same three channels.
Yeah.
Everyone would read the paper in your town or your city. And now it really is like we may not have that commonality anymore, but the culture that we consume is so much more easily tailored to any individual one of us.
Right.
And that's great. Yeah, for anyone dealing with a wide range of issues that again are not discussed or stigmatized in our culture, it's huge. And that's really great. And comics, I'm really glad to say I think is a part of that.
I think it's a huge part of that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's always been the strength of comics. Like, you don't need a giant team or a giant budget. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but like it's just any one of us can do a comic with a pen or your iPhone or an iPad, or, like the tools are just around us and they're tools that we use for other purposes constantly. And so for me, like I was just rereading, I'm going to completely mispronounce their name, but M.K. Schwarzek. I think it's
Sounds good to me.
yeah, Czerwiec. Her book about being a rookie nurse on an AIDS ward in Chicago in the 90s before there was any really viable treatment for AIDS. Like at the beginning of the book, they're still treating people with AZT.
Yeah.
And it just like MK was a nurse, she's not, she did art, but like she's not somebody who's like, I am an artist. This is how I inhabit the world. That was some serious moonlighting, by the way. And
And
she
the most serious.
the most serious, and like she created this amazing book. I wanted to reread it because of COVID, because it's basically about like how do you create a connection with people who are undergoing like terrible medical issues. And I mean, the sad thing about COVID, and not to drag down the tone, it's just like people like weren't able to say goodbye. Like they were never
Yeah.
able to have that moment with their loved ones. And I think that's where like the lack of any discussion of it becomes really cruel, because you weren't able to be there, you weren't able to go into the hospital, and now no one is talking about it. They're acting like your loss never happened.
Yeah.
That's really messed up. Yeah, I mean, It's definitely making me see things differently. I had been teaching for the last 2 years through a grant program. New York City gives grants through an organization called Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. And I had applied for and received grants to teach comics at a local community space. But with COVID, it's closed indefinitely. And so I think next year I'm not going to teach and I'm just going to work on book projects.
Okay.
So you're now my accountability buddy.
We kind of all are. It's funny, like I've had this like network of people. I don't know if you know Francois Vigneault. He did that book Titan.
I've met him. I don't know him well. I actually, I think the last time I saw him was in a pool at SPX.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah, we were talking. We did an interview with him. My buddy Jeff and I did an interview with him just this last week, and after he's just got like an amazing hustle and has really just made giant inroads recently. And I talked to Jeff right after the interview, and he's just like, "Are you feeling more inspired to do this thing now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Like, dude knows what's going on, and like, it's there's nothing better than seeing people doing what you're doing and doing one step beyond what you're doing
Yeah.
to let you know that like you're on the right path. Just keep your head down and keep working.
Well, I guess it's like that saying, like, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
Never.
But
If I'm the smartest person in the room, you're fucked.
yeah, ugh, that's terrifying. For me at least. But I think it's also like one of the things, like people are always talking about like cities are dead, blah, blah, blah. Like nobody wants to be in cities. The thing is, at the end of the day, like if I weren't surrounded by other artists so I could see living the life I want, it's a lot harder to have the confidence to go for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard enough. Like I've worked on book proposals that have not done anything. I'm currently working on a book proposal with someone. It's basically a memoir by a woman in baseball. And like maybe nothing will happen with it, but you have to keep trying.
Yeah.
Even if your comics are a personal project, that is fine.
Hmm. Well,
And oh, sorry.
oh, I was going to say that's another thing going back to the kind of 12-steppy thing that I think I kind of gleaned into without knowing it is like the way I've managed to keep doing comics and the way I've managed to like be quote unquote successful at it is I'm not attached to the results. Like I'm only interested in making the work. I'm not like I'm going to do this comic so that I can get this. I'm just like, no, I'm going to make this comic because this comic is this comic, and this is what I want to write about. And what happens with it afterwards, I don't know. Like that's out of my control. So yeah, that's one of the things like I feel like as artists, anyone who is genuinely successful as an artist, they're not worried about like how people are going to receive the work or what they're going to think about it or what they're going to write about it later or years down the road. They're just interested in making it and getting it into the world.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I completely agree. I will say, like, I did one graphic novel that just came out to like total silence, and that was tough. I did a graphic novel called The Black Feather Falls, which is like a mystery set in kind of jazz age London. It got nominated for an Ignatz Award. Like I was very, and it was work I was genuinely enjoying doing. So it's not like it was a total fail, but like it really did not much when it came out as a collection. And like part of me is still haunted by that, but I learned so much doing it.
Hmm.
Like you have to look at the positive. Yeah, that can be hard with with comics, just like finding an audience. Like, cause I agree that like the process for me is the primary thing. There's something in my brain that really likes that sort of like friction that words and pictures create when they're next to each other.
Yeah.
And like the challenge of writing in a way that caption doesn't just mindlessly rehash what's in the image. Like I love that dynamic where you're kind of like creating things that complement each other. But yeah, it can be tough to find an audience. That's just part of the journey as well. Like I do struggle with that, but then I hear like the Smith song going through my head, like you just haven't earned it yet, baby. Like it's not a reason to quit. It's just a reason to keep going and try new things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it, it's not easy. I
Sorry,
mean,
I've banned Morrissey in my ears.
oh my God, he's gotten so terrible. He has gotten so terrible.
It's it sucks because I love the Smiths, but I'm just like it's gonna be a while before I can listen to them because I think about
Uh,
Morrissey.
there are people in the modern world who, and maybe this has always been a thing, but they're just working so hard to just like trash their own legacy.
Yeah,
And I don't get it. J.K.
yeah.
Rowling is another one where it's just like, you could just stop talking. If I were her,
Just
I would
delete your Twitter account.
delete the Twitter, go to Mustique, hang out on the beach, done. Because like you're only going to diminish your long term. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. Maybe she has so much money she just doesn't care. But like it just like when people just work hard to like insult their fans.
Yeah, to ruin the experience for the people who put them there in the first place.
Ugh. Because yeah, I don't think I don't know if we're thinking of the same Marcy incident, but like I don't think there are that many Smiths fans who are like really excited about either, neo-Nazism, Brexit. Like where do you even stop? Like, oh God, just think like talk about Oscar Wilde. You were doing well when you were getting photographed with like little Oscar Wilde collections. That would have been a good place to just stop.
I agree entirely. I agree
Ugh.
entirely.
And I talk about this with my husband sometimes because he's also like the Smiths were a huge band for him as well. And he's like, well, but like, the other people in the band, Johnny Marr, and I'm like, yeah, but like, it's just so hard to look past the like writhing Irish dude who's like, ah. Oh my gosh.
I was gonna ask like how you've done how many graphic novels?
So I've done two, Undertow and Black Feather Falls.
Okay.
And I think my next book will be a memoir,
Okay.
but it'll be like I don't want to go into it too much because it's like I don't know. I really okay, maybe I will go into it. Ha ha ha.
As much or as little as you want.
Yeah, I kind of now that I'm in my 40s, I kind of want to talk about the experience of being a woman who doesn't have kids
Okay.
and talk about like specifically because when I have never wanted kids. I never wanted kids. I can't explain it. Maybe it's a childhood thing. I don't know. But I guess the issue for me is that like as women, it's just like very assumed that at some point you're just gonna get in.
Right.
Oh
Like
my God, so many people think that's like small talk. It's not small talk, people. I'm just gonna put that out there as a PSA. It's not small talk to ask someone like really kind of intimate questions, but like because it's just assumed you're going to. There's not a lot of like guidance or advice for people who don't want to. So I kind of want to do a book about like kind of like make the book I wish I had had when I was like in my 20s. Because I do feel like you kind of have to like plan your life a little differently. And also you have to anticipate, I don't know how it is for guys, but as a woman, you have to anticipate that you're kind of going to like lose touch with a lot of people as they have kids and you don't. Part of that is just geographical, like people will move out of the city where you live. People will move back where they came from. The first time I experienced this, I had a friend who wanted to have a kid and like she was pregnant. I hung out with her while she was pregnant and I was like, oh, like this is kind of just the same. And then of course when she actually had the baby, it was very different.
yeah.
And then she just kept on moving further and further away. This is like really hard to maintain any kind of like friendship that resembles what we had before. And of course, like you can kind of reinvent it and that's fine. But like I just wasn't prepared for stuff like that. Yeah, I kind of want to work on a project about that.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what form it will take. I was doing a lot of writing about it last year. And so part of it, like, and I'm trying not to think of it as a commercial project either. I'm trying to just think of it as like something I'm going to do. Because again, like commercial success is totally fleeting. It's very unpredictable. You can't like plan on it. And book proposals are like, it's a whole different way of thinking about a project, in my opinion. So I just want to do this project for myself
Yeah.
and just work on it. And
I
just have,
feel though that there's a built-in audience for that because about half of my friends, maybe two-thirds of my friends are women, and most of them aren't parents. And I feel like there's an appetite for that. I think there's other people who would love to see a version of their experience out there.
well, sir, from your mouth to the comics gods and goddesses' ears.
That's how it works.
I hope so. And like, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the fall goes. We'll see how the winter goes. It's hard to plan right now. This will not be news. And I am working on a different book proposal as well, but yeah, it's good. And I like my day job. I have no idea how long it will continue. It's a contract job. But I do really like it. I just make informational illustration.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing that? Like, I'm curious if you could maybe, however much depth you want to go into it, if you could describe a bit of your work history and how you ended up here doing infographics.
Oh wow, yeah. I've done like every job under the sun except for table waiting.
I've never done that either. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I feel like yeah, in New York that's really the province of a very particular kind of person. It's like the actor job.
Oh, I was saying LA too. I grew up in
Yeah.
Southern California, and you'd go to like a Johnny Rockets diner, and you'd be like, "Oh, that waiter's trying way too hard to impress me. This is not
Or they're just really hot. It's just like, wow.
that handsome waiter. You can tone it down a little bit."
Oh man, so I studied art history in college. I started working at a museum when I graduated. I became frustrated. I don't think I knew how hard it would be to do art and work a full-time job
Yeah.
when I got out of college, and I tried to make it work, but then I got offered this really strange fellowship at a college in Pennsylvania where it was kind of like you work in the art department part-time, but they give you a studio and a stipend, and I was like, I'm going to do art. However, it was the most socially isolating situation I'd ever been in. I didn't know anyone on this college campus. Everyone was like a teenager. The town was very suburban and like nothing was going on.
Where was this?
This is Haverford College, which is outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
I think if I'd been in Philadelphia proper, it would have been better, but I was really not that smart about what it would be like being in the suburbs. I ended up meeting my husband. I broke up with my boyfriend. I met my husband kind of by accident on a comics trip to Europe. And at some point, it became clear that like if we were going to be serious about each other, we should probably be in the same country.
Yeah.
And so I moved to the UK in 2004, and I stayed there until 2012. And while I was in the UK, I did a wide variety of jobs. I worked in an eyeglass store. I was a nanny. I did educational comics for a US company, which actually worked out really well. It was one of those jobs where I was like, I don't want to do this, so I'm going to ask for a lot of money, and then they're going to say no. Um, and then they said yes, and so I like had a fairly decent paying job for a while. Then I did a master's degree in illustration, which actually was really good. Like before I did that degree, I was kind of happy just doing not terribly ambitious visually black and white comics. And the illustration degree just helped me think about my images a lot more.
Yeah, I definitely noticed the difference between your the comics I remember you doing and what I saw when I ran into you again.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind. I mean, I definitely had a lot of catching up to do. And the illustration degree definitely helped. And then when I came back to New York, I had this really hilariously bad job working as a telemarketer for an opera company. It
That is
was
so specific.
it was hilariously bad. I ended up quitting just because I felt like I could not handle like getting yelled at anymore. Um, and then I started working in print production, and that lasted, I guess, like 3 years, and that was really good. That was just like a nice, polite desk job.
Yeah.
It was not very well paid. I did not receive a huge amount of respect, but I was like in a nice, quiet office. Oh, I totally forgot about this like chunk of time where I worked for a nonprofit in New York City. It's the East Coast branch of 826 Valencia in San Francisco. It's basically like the nonprofit that Dave Eggers founded to provide tutoring in underserved neighborhoods.
Okay.
So I ran a superhero store for a year. 'Cause all the storefronts have like a theme. Then I left to work in publishing. Dave Eggers himself told me that was a mistake. So she had to go work in publishing. He's like, publishing is dead. I was like, too late. Um, Otherwise, a very nice man. And so that was just like a very nice desk job. My previous job with the superhero store was like we worked in a basement. It was very tense. It was always flooding. So like working on the fifth floor of a New York City office building just felt very nice. I had a friend who was working for this company, which is basically about.com. They rebranded maybe like 3 or 4 years ago and split the website up into a lot of mini sites that are actually quite huge now. They're big sites, but like they spun them off by genre. So there's a health site called Very Well. There's a lifestyle site called The Spruce. Um, and then there's a finance and job site called The Balance. So there are a variety of sites, and part of their relaunch was that they want to increase the SEO of any individual page by constantly keeping it up to date, constantly updating it.
And
And oh,
for
sorry.
for the listener and also for me, what is an SEO?
It's search engine optimization.
Okay, I should
So
know that. See, I
basically,
told you I'm not a tech person.
so basically, yeah, my layperson's understanding of it is that like anytime the Google algorithm changes, like different things are prioritized. And I think on one, maybe on all of them, but I think a big thing they look for is like how old is this page and when was it last changed?
Okay.
And so their idea was like, okay, well, we'll have editors and they'll update things periodically, but it will also add illustration, and that will help the SEO. So they hired a bunch of illustrators to do this. And a friend of mine was doing it, and she recommended me. And they called me, and I did a test, which was not successful. But then they let me retake the test for reasons I'm still not entirely sure about. And so I started working for them in July of last year. It's been a really good challenge because you're just drawing like every different kind of thing. So, like for example, at the moment, I'm drawing like how to rear sheep. Um, Also, like autoimmune disease and your thyroid, and how to make the best cookies. It's just very like everything.
That's quite a gamut.
It is a real gamut. There used to like we would also used to do tech illustrations. And so, but that hasn't been a thing for a while. And we also used to do lots of career illustrations. So like in addition to that mix, I'd be drawing like what you can do if you sign up for this particular branch of, like the Munitions Corps and the Marine Corps. And it was just like, this is really wild. Um, there was a period when like they started laying people off, and I was totally petrified. But so far, I've held on, and I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, and once I get off this call, I am going to just be drawing those sheep. I'm going to be drawing sheep, a stroke. What's it like when you have a stroke?
Uh-huh. Yeah, my father had one of those.
And yeah, it is. Oh my God. One of my students in my Word Up class had a stroke during COVID,
Oh, jeez.
and like his wife couldn't go visit him. It was just like, ugh. So yeah, it is on my mind, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a wide variety of things. I think it's been really good for me as an illustrator. Like as an illustrator, as you know, like volume is very intermittent. like in terms of paid volume.
Right.
And comics is great because you're always drawing. But like this has been good in terms of like maintaining a certain level of like daily random drawing. And also sacrilege alert, I've started working a lot more on the iPad.
Oh, that's not everybody's doing that.
Okay.
Like
Like in
Fran
comics,
was
it's a little bit,
like about that.
yeah, I feel like in comics it's a little bit more controversial. There's still people like weeping ink tears and like, you know, and one of my studio mates, Greg Benton, still works entirely traditionally. His work is so beautiful. It's all like watercolor, colored pencil, large format. So I appreciate and respect the old ways, but like with the volume of illustrations for this particular job, like it's just you don't even have time to scan it.
Yeah.
Everything has to be in the one place. Like increasingly, the iPad is my primary art making tool, and
Yeah.
I broke mine in peak COVID, and I thought I was going to possibly just something. I was just like, I can't even handle this. Um, but one of my students, who's an incredibly talented cartoonist, called Sharon Lee Dela Cruz, lent me theirs. I'm eternally grateful. Oh, actually, that's another moonlighting thing I've been doing. I edited Sharon's memoir, which is coming out, I think, next year. It's called I Am a Wild Seed, and it's about coming out as queer later in life. They went to Cooper Union, they're a street artist, and then they kind of just discovered comics and got signed up to do a memoir pretty quickly. And so we worked really intensely together, which was a really cool experience. So yeah, so Sharon is not only a creative inspiration, but also saved my bacon. Saved that vegan bacon when my iPad broke. So thank you, Sharon. Thank you. But yeah, so that's my current day job. I really hope I can hold on to it. Please,
Fingers
Illustrator.
crossed. Fingers crossed.
I mean, like the company, because of COVID, like people are really using sites like that a lot right
Hmm.
now. I want to be optimistic. I'm going to consciously choose optimism in this
Yeah.
case. And so, yeah, so I'm working there a lot. And I like it. It's always been remote. Oh, also, if I had stayed at my old job, I would have essentially been fired because like there was a long period where they were furloughing the person who took my job. So working remotely has been a real blessing during this period. It does make finding time for comics more difficult, but it's also just like such a cool thing for the moment. And my mom would say, focus on today. Because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like you don't know what's going to happen a month down the road. And that has never been more true.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. That's more true now than ever.
yeah, it's really, it just keeps on becoming more true, for better or for worse. Well, speaking of work, I should actually get to work.
Okay.
But do you have any lingering questions?
Um, let's see. So you mentioned that you have one more, at least one more Cranklets Chronicles, and you is that something that you can intend to continue doing? Because I mean, it seems like there's probably plenty more women in baseball in whatever aspect that you could probably cover.
So the comic I was going to launch at Mocha this year was part of a three-part series about specifically women playing baseball. So when I was a kid, I loved baseball obsessively. It was around the time when the Mets won their only World Series in my lifetime. Yeah, it was just like the most exciting thing that had ever happened in like the region I grew up in. Like I grew up on Long Island. My parents both grew up in the city, but then like moved slightly outside to my great frustration. It's like you can walk to Queens from where I grew up. It's like, come on, we could have just been in Queens. So it was like by far the most exciting thing that ever happened when I was a kid. But I never realized, and says a lot about our culture, I never realized that I'd never seen a woman playing baseball. Like it just never occurred to me.
Yeah.
And like I played softball as a kid. I loved playing softball. I'm terrible at all sports, but I liked it, and I liked meeting other kids. Like I went to Catholic school, so it was like the way I met the kids who actually lived in my neighborhood. And it just never occurred to me that I'd never seen a woman play baseball. And like, stuff like a League of Their Own, it was a movie, so it didn't feel real, even though I know it's based on real people. But like, I just watched men play baseball, never thought anything about it. I don't know. I don't know what happened. At some point, we moved from London to New York, and I started to get into baseball again because it was just like something I'd missed the whole time we lived in the UK.
Yeah.
I started reading more about baseball. I started to realize that there was just like a lot of stuff I hadn't absorbed or hadn't even known was out there. And so when I found out that the team I loved, the New York Mets, had been founded by a woman, and I had never heard about it.
Hmm.
As a lifelong Mets fan, I'd never been told about it. She's not talked about very much. Like the stadium that the Mets played in when I was a kid was named after some random dude who really didn't have that much to do with founding the Mets at all, and who didn't want his name on the stadium, to my knowledge. And it is such a deeply sexist culture. It is insane.
Yeah, that sounds like it's not an accidental, like it sounds like it's she was purposefully erased from or reduced in the history of that team.
Yes, I think that's quite fair. And people who are involved with the team, I'm sure, would say, well, no, she's in the Mets Hall of Fame. Like, there's a little gate at Citi Field named after her. A little gate? This woman, like,
Yeah, she
poured,
founded the team.
she founded the team. And not only that, she stuck with the team. She gave them money year after year, even though Major League Baseball, this is before free agency. Major League Baseball had only made the worst players available to the Mets. This is before you could just buy a contract. It was before you could sign someone like Aaron Judge once he comes into free agency. This was back when like the teams controlled the destiny of the players through a contractual clause. It was designed so that the teams had primacy. And so basically, when Curt Flood, basically led this revolution where players could actually be paid what they were worth, and actually make some real money playing baseball for themselves instead of for the owners. That's the baseball life I grew up in. Where there are all these big stars and big contracts. But when the Mets were founded, there were no big contracts. It was just like you signed with the team. If they didn't like you, they got rid of you, and that was it. Basically the Mets were founded with like the dregs, like old players who'd never played baseball in the major leagues before, like all sorts of craziness. And she stuck with them regardless. And when the
Yeah,
Mets won
she
the World,
deserved more for that.
yeah, I think so. And like when the Mets won the World Series in 1969, it was so surreal. But like she actually got some validation for her investment. And then once you start digging into the history of women players, it gets very upsetting
Yeah.
because basically, unfortunately, black players were banned from Major League Baseball in 1887. And the same people who didn't want African Americans in baseball did not want women in baseball.
Yeah.
It's basically this white supremacist,
White dudes.
yes, specifically white supremacist dudes, because like there were some dudes who clearly didn't give a crap and you just went along with it, but there were some dudes who were very powerful in baseball who consciously promoted it as a white male sport.
Yeah.
And those people basically had their way until the 1940s, until 1947, when Jackie Robinson was signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers. And even then, it only happened because New York State changed its employment law, so you couldn't discriminate on the basis of race. It didn't happen because of a Major League Baseball change. It happened because of post-war employment law change.
Yeah.
So baseball doesn't even really deserve credit for that. But there were women who wanted to play baseball all through baseball history. For example, like I keep talking about Smith College where I attended. Smith had a baseball team. Vassar had a baseball team. Women at colleges in the Midwest played baseball. But gradually there was this sort of movement to just keep women out. Unfortunately, it's lasted until the present day. Like young girls are basically told that softball is the only option for them. That's fine, but there's no Major League Baseball of softball.
Right.
Like there's a glass ceiling with softball. It's really messed up. Like It's debatable whether or not women can play baseball at the major league level, but the truth is that they're not given the chance. Not to like belabor this parallel too much, but when baseball was segregated, the same thing happened with black players. The white press pretended that the black baseball leagues did not exist, and the teams wouldn't give players tryouts. So it became very like easy to say, oh, well, there's no one over there who's talented enough because they were just being held at such arm's distance.
Yeah.
And it became clear once black players did play in the major leagues that not only were they talented enough, they were exceptional.
Yeah.
Obviously not everybody, but the stars of black baseball were exceptional players.
Yeah.
And there are women who've played in minor league baseball in America because increasingly after Title IX, there's less of a legal basis for keeping them out. And there's a fabulous organization which is based in LA called Baseball for All, which is just about that. Like it's just about making sure baseball is for everybody. Because at the end of the day, baseball and softball are different sports. They're played on a slightly different field. Obviously, the ball is different. You know, the pitching is different. The hitting philosophy is different. And a lot of the women who played on the teams that A League of Their Own is about had also played softball, and they preferred to play baseball. They're just very different sports. It makes me sad that this like bizarre glass ceiling still exists, especially because you can see it happen. Like, for example, there was a young woman named Monet Davis who played for a team in the Philadelphia area that won the Little League World Series, and she was the winning pitcher.
Yeah.
But she wasn't able to play baseball in college.
That's
So
ridiculous.
yeah, it's a little weird. It's definitely creepy, and you know, especially with stuff like women's soccer getting its own league, with
Yeah.
women's basketball getting its own league. I, as a baseball fan, would much rather support women who've never been given an opportunity to play baseball. I would rather support them in playing baseball than just like continuing to watch the status quo. But I haven't been given that choice as a consumer or as a fan. Whereas with soccer, I mean, soccer has a very bad history with women just because, you know, it was banned. Women playing soccer was banned in multiple countries in the 20th century. It was banned in Brazil. It was banned in Germany. It was banned in the UK, essentially. Women couldn't play on the regulation grounds that the Football Association maintains in the United Kingdom. So that basically meant they couldn't play football. Like they couldn't
Yeah.
play soccer because if you can't play at your local soccer stadium, like where are you going to play?
Right.
Like you're just going to play in the parking lot? Like this with you. Soccer has turned a corner to a certain extent through mass demand, but like in America, people don't even know that women can play baseball. So basically, with this series of comics, I was hoping and still hope to tell the story of the women who did play, just to kind of show that like that history exists, because they've been completely erased. Aside from A League of Their Own, which is still the top grossing baseball movie of all time.
Yet again, an indicator that there's appetite for that, you
Yeah,
know? It's
yeah,
not
very much
just the
so.
novelty of it, you know?
Part of it, I'm sure, is star power. I mean, like the people who were in that movie were very popular at the time, but the narrative is what gets people.
Yeah, whatever happened to Madonna?
Whatever happened to Madonna? Whatever happened? I mean, she was great in that.
She was totally popular at the time.
Let's not talk about, yeah, I mean, it's, oh, Madonna. I mean, whatever happened to her? She's still, oh my God, I watch so much Drag Race. And if you watch Drag Race, it's like Madonna, Mariah Carey, and I can't even think of someone else, but like there are certain people where it's like they never went away. So yeah, so I wanted to kind of like raise that history up a little bit. Obviously, I don't want to exclude people who are not gender binary. Like in my mind, like my project encompasses those people as well. It's just hard to know how people in the past would have gendered themselves. They were just classified as women at the time. And so that makes me a little uneasy, but I can't retroactively, like, you can't ask a deceased person who never talked about their gender, like what their gender identity was. My project is definitely not exclusionary of people with other gender identities. And I'm always trying to think of like, the title keeps getting longer. It's like, first it was like women in baseball, then it was like women, baseball, and social change. Now it's basically like people who are not cisgender men, baseball, and social change in America. Because like I really do like I feel really passionately about the place of trans people in America and people who don't who don't conform to a gender binary. If anyone is listening, I definitely see you and I believe in your right to play baseball 100%. It's just that the way the history has been told is very binary, and so I'm kind of like trying to like find my place in that
Yeah.
because like I don't feel like a completely, I don't feel like a completely straight out of the box like woman for a lot of reasons. Like the word woman feels weird to me. I feel like as a country, the way we talk about gender has evolved a lot. I mean, like I went to a women's college, but ironically, that was like the first place I met and spent a lot of time with trans people.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people who were there were like, well, I'm not actually that comfortable with this identity. Like, I feel very strongly about having another identity. And so meeting people who are having that discussion very early, like, I definitely am open for baseball culture to be as inclusive as possible. Yeah, but when you're talking about history, it's hard to know how to describe people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sleuthing that you have to end up doing.
And people have done it, which is great. Like, for example, there's a wonderful journalist called Brittany de la Cretas who went back through obituaries of the women who played in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, which is the league that A League of Their Own is about. So Brittany went back and read all their obituaries and basically saw how many of them had like some sort of coded language about a LGBTQIA partner. And so like they were able to retroactively kind of be like, wow, this person was queer. Like because that league was very homophobic, unfortunately, just because it was run by like a bunch of like, cis white dudes. They were like, we want them to be pretty and we want them to be, like the girl next door. And so basically erased the queer identity of a lot of the players who were in that league. So Brittany's work has been really interesting in terms of like redressing that and kind of retroactively giving those people a queer identity, or at least leaving it open that they could have had a queer identity. But with gender, that's trickier. So it's something I'm conscious of. But at the end of the day, the current status quo in baseball is so cisgendered male dominated that like I'm just trying to chip away. So yeah, so I'm working on a 3-issue series about women playing baseball, and then yeah, we'll see. There's so many stories, and the thing is, like with as you know from doing any kind of historical research, that is not very widely discussed. I'm sure this happens with cycling research all the time. As you uncover like a story, you uncover other stories.
Yeah, it's like pulling at a thread, and you're just like, okay, I'm trying to tell this one story, but now I'm getting pulled over to this other thing here.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when you're talking about narratives in American history with gender, race, sexuality, like all of that stuff has been shunted to one side for so long that like there's a lot to talk about. And the great thing about comics is that there's no gatekeepers. Like the field is wide open. It just your own individual capacity for that depth of research and the time it takes to actually create a comic, which for those of for anyone listening who's not a cartoonist, it is more time than you would ever think possible.
The way I got into doing more historically based comics was I was dating a woman, like right after I got divorced, who was a Marxist, and she like studied Marxism. She actually like
Yeah.
was an academic around that. And I remember hanging out, and I was like, it would be really fun. She's working on her, I'm forgetting what you call it, because I dropped out of school. She,
Like a
she was
master's thesis or
exactly working on her master's thesis and talking about how intense it was. And I was like, it'd be really fun to do something, where I got to research something, because I like history too. And I was like,
yeah.
that's where I ended up doing the Pope book. And I was like, this will be a fun way to kill like 3 months. A year and a half later, I had a fraction of it done.
Yeah.
Fraction. When you start, yeah. Because also, if you're going to come at the Pope, you best not miss. You better have your
Oh,
notes.
yeah, do not miss. Oh my God, The Wire, more 90s realness. Oh my God. But yeah, I mean, like with the first comic I did, I was like, this is going to be so easy. This woman's in the public eye to a certain extent. Holy crap! It turned out like My mom was working at the hospital she founded when I was born. Like I was born in a hospital this woman founded. I had never heard of her before.
That's insane.
It just got so wild. And like, of course, I don't need to tell you about the rabbit hole of visual research,
Right.
where all of a sudden I'm on Zillow, looking at this woman's like Upper East Side apartment after 8 renovations. It's just like, this is absolutely insane. But it's all part of the process.
Yeah.
And you can't fight it. You just have to, it takes as long as it takes.
Yeah. You have to learn to embrace it.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily it really is a labor of love. I mean, for both of us, I feel like I can, not to, I mean, like you obviously feel as passionately about this as I do. Yeah, you just have to go with the flow and wherever you end up, that's it. But it's about like, I do feel like the effort enhances, like what you're looking for is the integrity of the story and you can't rush it. I, oh my God, thanks to my old office's laser printer and this terrible government stimulus checks, I don't think I've lost money doing this, but it definitely hasn't gotten me any money. So you just have to love it. And like I have to say, it is very satisfying when people who think they know about baseball read one of my comics and they're just like, I had no idea any of this even existed. And that's super satisfying because I'm like, haha, one person who's like slightly like I like the idea of just like doing battle with like the sanctity of baseball in America, where people kind of see it as this thing that has this like quasi-religious overtones. Baseball has done so much good and like baseball, it's the American sport and it's like, yeah, it's American because it reflects American white supremacy,
Yeah.
class warfare, worker exploitation, sexism. Like, yeah, it's super American because all
In
the
the
crap,
worst way.
yeah, it's like all the bad stuff. None of this is good. But if you don't pay attention to the stuff that's good, then like it's like learning about America in general. If you don't pay attention to the stuff that's not good, then you don't really know America.
Yeah, yeah. So true.
So that's kind of my goal. And again, it's not commercial. Like I wish it were. But yeah, it's just satisfying like informing people a little bit about the stuff that they think they know inside and out, but they don't. And that's, I think that's a worthy goal.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I think it's an absolutely
Like,
way to go.
well, I can't wait for your Major Taylor major book.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward. I don't even like baseball, and I really enjoyed. I don't like sports. It's not anything against baseball. I just don't have like a mind for that. And I enjoyed the hell out of those comics.
Oh, thank
They're
you.
so compelling. Your ability to draw a reader in and get them up to date, because I don't know anything about baseball, like get them up to speed. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it quite a bit.
Oh, I thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah, I think people kind of close down when I use the B word, and I respect that. If I hadn't been brainwashed very early on, I would probably feel exactly the same way. But for me, it's just like it's one of those things that is a mirror to our national soul. And there are other things that are like that, but baseball really spans this. So basically, like if you look at the beginning of baseball history in the United States, it's starting in like the 1820s to the present day, that's basically the history of American urbanism. It spans a lot of really interesting periods in our country's history, but it also spans like a history of racial oppression,
Yeah.
which baseball is still trying to exercise. Yeah, so for me, it's like even if you don't like baseball, it is a convenient like avenue into discussing things about America, which I think at large can feel very overwhelming. But if you just look at them through like the lens of an institution, maybe you can kind of like get a better sense of how they've affected the current America. Well, I'm going to stop with my sales pitch. I'm
I'm
gonna
already sold.
Thank you. I'm gonna eat lunch. But yeah, and then draw some sheep.
Yes.
But yeah, anyone who wants to get my comics, my website is just littlewhitebird.com, and there are links to previews. There's links to my Etsy site. I am always up for talking baseball at conventions, so please don't be shy when conventions happen again. And yeah, thank you so much, Fredo, for getting in touch.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
oh, the pleasure is all mine. Well, I hope you get to have some good biking this weekend. I don't know what the weather's like in the Bay Area.
The air is terrible, but it's
Oh my
not
God, of
as
course. I keep
terrible as it
forgetting
was
about the.
yesterday.
Oh, I feel so silly. I keep forgetting about the fires.
Oh yeah. Well, yesterday, I mean, we had the red sun on Wednesday, and that was actually good air quality. And then it's been like slate gray the last couple of days, and that's been horrible air quality. But
Oh,
now it's somewhere in the middle. So like, I'm pretty certain I can ride for a couple hours without getting lung cancer. So I'm
oh,
gonna make that
that's
happen.
so freaking crazy. Like one of my comics friends, Summer Pierre, who I usually met at SPX with this weekend, I think the town where she grew up in Northern California has just been destroyed.
It's horrifying. I mean, we're lucky because we're in Oakland. I don't want to say we're fireproof, but we're pretty protected because it's so urban. You know, we don't have
Yeah.
a lot of flammables around us. But like, yeah, where I go, right up in the North Bay, and like, you know, it's great riding because it's heavily wooded, and a lot of that is burning up. You know, La
Yeah.
Honda was burning up. It's really frightening.
Oh, that is just like, I can't even imagine. Yeah, I hope being on the ocean helps for like getting better air, but like that's insane if like even in San Francisco it's still so oppressive. Like
Yeah.
that's really, yeah, I was talking before about my friend Lisa who lives in Portland, and it sounded like they were really having a lot of problems as well.
They are. Yeah, I have a friend who lives in. I mean, you know Bach, right? Like he
Oh
was.
yeah.
Yeah, he texted me the other day and was like talking about the fires. And I've got a friend Brandon from my Southern California days who lives up in Southern Oregon, and
Okay.
it's as bad there as it is here. Like
Oh,
it's the whole West Coast is burning up.
I mean, like I can only imagine it's gonna eventually happen here. Like with climate change,
Yeah.
it's just so scary. Well, hang in there, and I hope if there are a couple of good hours, you get some bike time. I'll leave you with a quick anecdote. I just had a launch for the exhibit of my class's work at Word Up Community Bookshop, which is a small community space in my neighborhood in Washington Heights. And one of the students, even though she lives in Washington Heights, I'd never met. She was like, "Oh, come meet my family." So I said hi to her mom, and she's like, "Oh, this is my dad." And I was just like, "What the hell?" Like, her dad had the sickest bike. It was like the craziest, like most beautiful racing bike, and I was just like, So wow, that's a beautiful bike, sir. Well, like, what's the story?" And it turned out he biked for the Dominican Republic in the Pan Am Games, and he still rides like 30 miles a day.
Uh-huh.
And he had his like International Cycling Federation. I don't know exactly what it's called, but like he had his membership card for like this international. So I was like, what the hell? I was like, oh my God, I have to stop complaining about hills. Like if Senor Perez can still get out there like in his 50s and like just like kill those hills in New Jersey, then like, oh my God, what am I complaining about?
Oh, I've gotten served by people who have like white clown hair. Like you just see like this ring of hair and like they're bald on top and like, you know, when they're yeah, their legs versus what their face looks like, completely different world. You know, like
Yeah,
the body's like a 30-year-old and the face is like literally a 60-year-old. Like
yeah.
it's amazing like what people can continue to do if they keep at it.
Oh my God. Well, fingers crossed
Thank
for
you.
safe cycling for both of us into our 60s and beyond,
Yes.
I believe. Well, have a awesome day. It was so nice to talk to you.
You too?
And yeah, if you have any like follow-up questions or anything, just let me know.
Okay. Sounds good.
Have a great day. Bye.
Take care.